the psychology of people who never ask for help. There's a certain kind of person who will quietly carry something heavy for months before telling anyone. They'll manage the crisis, absorb the stress, hold everything together on the outside. And then when someone finally asks if they're okay, they'll say they're fine. Not because they're lying, because on some level, they genuinely believe they should be. And that belief has been with them for a very long time. Today, we're going to look at the psychology behind people who struggle to ask for help. What's happening beneath the surface, where this pattern comes from, and what it quietly says about the kind of person they've had to become. Psychologists call this tendency self-reliant suppression, a behavioral pattern in which a person consistently manages distress internally, avoids disclosing vulnerability, and defaults to independence even when support is available and would genuinely help. Research from the University of Toronto and the London School of Economics has found that this pattern is far more common than it appears in clinical settings, precisely because the people who have it are usually functioning. They're not in crisis, they're managing. And managing, from the outside, looks a lot like being fine. But functioning and thriving are not the same thing. And the gap between them is where this psychology lives. To understand why some people can't ask for help, you have to look at what the brain learned to associate with needing it. Because asking for help is not a neutral act. For most people, it's emotionally loaded. And for a specific group of people, it was once genuinely costly. Neurologically, help-seeking activates the same circuitry involved in vulnerability and social risk. The brain's threat detection system, centered in the amygdala, evaluates the act of disclosure and flags it for potential danger, judgment, rejection, the shifting of a power dynamic. In most people, the signal is mild and manageable, but in people who grew up in environments where expressing a need was met with dismissal, irritation, or emotional unavailability, that signal got amplified. The nervous system learned early. Needing something from other people is dangerous, and so it stopped asking. This is where childhood becomes the key to understanding the adult pattern. A large proportion of people who struggle to ask for help were, at some point, the most capable person in a room that needed one. Maybe they had a parent who was emotionally overwhelmed or simply absent. Maybe they were the oldest sibling who learned to manage, so the younger ones didn't have to worry. Maybe they were praised so consistently for being strong, for handling things, for not making a fuss, that needing help began to feel like a form of failure. Over time, independence stopped being a choice and became an identity. I handle things. That's who I am. Psychologists distinguish between two expressions of this pattern. The first is adaptive self-reliance, where a person is genuinely capable of independent problem-solving and draws real confidence from that competence. This is healthy. It becomes a strength in the right contexts. The second is compulsive self-reliance, a more rigid and often unconscious drive to manage alone regardless of the emotional cost, even when help is offered, even when the situation clearly exceeds what one person should carry. The person in this second category isn't choosing independence. They're unable to choose anything else. What makes compulsive self-reliance so persistent is that it comes with its own internal reward system. When you handle something alone, you get a brief but real sense of control. The brain registers the resolution and releases a signal of relief. That relief is reinforcing. It doesn't just feel good, it confirms a story. I was right not to ask. I was right to manage this myself. I don't need anyone. And so the pattern deepens. One solved problem at a time. One suppressed need at a time. Here's what the research reveals about people in this pattern, and it tends to surprise people. A 2017 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who consistently avoided help-seeking scored markedly higher on measures of interpersonal attunement, the ability to read others, anticipate their needs, and offer support proactively. In other words, These are often the first people to notice when someone else is struggling. They will show up for others without being asked. They will hold space, offer help, manage someone else's discomfort with real generosity. They simply cannot extend that same framework to themselves. The care that flows outward so naturally hits a wall the moment it needs to turn inward. Therapists working with this pattern often focus on a concept called earned trust. The slow, experiential process of discovering that receiving help does not cost you what it once did. It's not a cognitive reframe. You can't think your way into believing it's safe to be vulnerable. You have to experience it being safe repeatedly until the nervous system updates its prediction. This is why the change is slow. It's not about insight. It's about evidence. What all of this comes down to is a recognition that the people who seem the most self-sufficient are often the ones carrying the most weight in silence. Their strength is real. Their capability is genuine. But underneath it, in many cases, is a child who learned that needing things was a burden they weren't allowed to be. Not because they were told that directly, but because it was the message that came through anyway. Understanding this doesn't instantly undo the pattern, but it does something important. It shifts the story from, "I don't need anyone" to, "I learned not to need anyone," and those are very different sentences. One is a fixed identity, the other is a history. And history, unlike identity, can change.